What is up, everybody? It is JT Sports back to you guys with another episode of JT Sports Live. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. We had some technical difficulties trying to start this stream up. This is the third time we've tried to get the stream up and running, and now it seems like everything is going pretty smooth. The other day, it was the internet connection was trash. Now today, it's just tripping. So I appreciate you guys for coming in. Make sure that you guys like the live stream, share the live stream on your social media platforms with your friends, family, acquaintances. On top of that, make sure that you guys check out the JT Sports Podcast, which is available on all podcasting platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure that you guys go ahead and leave a 5-star review on the pod. Now, we have a really loaded show to get into. We're a little bit off schedule because of the technical difficulties that we had earlier, but I'm here with my NFC East 2021 record predictions. Going to be giving you guys my predictions for how the teams in this division will fare. Make sure that you guys follow my social media pages for updates on the channel, when I upload a new video, when I live stream, such and such. JT Sports _ the link to my Instagram and Twitter down in the comment section description down below. So let's start off with America's team, the team that's going to be featured on Hard Knocks, the Dallas Cowboys. Last season, the Dallas Cowboys went 6-10. They tied with the New York Giants for second place in the NFC East. Dak Prescott got injured. Now, when you look at Dak Prescott's injury, I mean, everybody questioned how important was he to this team. And last season showed you everything that you need to know about his importance, which is why I was saying that the Cowboys needed to sign him to a long-term deal. Everybody's trying to say Dak Prescott's overrated, Dak Prescott isn't all that great. Well, we saw what happened last year, ladies and gentlemen. Dak Prescott went down, and the season for Dallas went down in the drain as well with Dak Prescott. Now, I want to talk about my swing games for the Dallas Cowboys. I have two of them. Week 11 against Kansas City on the road, and Week 16 against the Washington football team. Now, I have that Kansas City Chiefs game circled on the schedule for Dallas because I think that this is going to be the game that we're going to figure out how good Dallas defense is going to be this year. Now, I don't like to judge teams based on what they do the first couple of weeks in the year because, as we already know, how good a team starts out may not be how good a team finishes. A good example for this is the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. They started out really good and they crashed and burned down the stretch. And I think the same can be said when it comes to trying to figure out how good the Dallas Cowboys defense is going to be this year. I think that around week 11, we should have a good idea of if this defense is going to be improved or will this defense continue to be bad. And I think a good test will be against Kansas City, a team that has a lot of firepower on offense. They have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. You have Patrick Mahomes, the best QB in the game right now. So I think that this is going to be a good test that if you are a Dallas fan and determining how good your defense is going to be. Week 16 against Washington is another marquee matchup that you have to look out for because this game pretty much could decide the division. And Washington and Dallas, they already face off a couple of weeks prior. They face off in week 14. So then you face off a couple of weeks later, and this game, with it coming down the final stretch of the year, could end up deciding who ends up winning this division. I think the two best teams so far in this division are the Cowboys and Washington. So those are my two swing games for Dallas. For those of you guys who don't know what swing games are not important games, but they are games that when the season ends, you're going to be like, okay, if we would have won this game, our season probably would have went this way. Or if we would have lost this game, then our season probably would have went this way. So swing games kind of are games that I think have a big impact on how the tone of the season goes for said team. I think those are the two big swing games for Dallas. best case scenario for the Dallas Cowboys this year, I have them at 11-6. If Mike McCarthy can have this team playing up to the level of talent that they have, I think that this team should be looking at a wild card berth. And they could be a really terrifying team to face that if you have to face them in the playoffs this year, because everybody tries to make it seem like the Dallas Cowboys aren't one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. Like I was arguing with my guy Juice Alert a couple of days ago about this. I tried to tell him that Dallas has one of the best rosters top to bottom in the NFL. They suffered a lot of injuries last season. Of course, we know what happened to Dak Prescott. The offensive line was kind of banged up, and the defense just completely underperformed. But if Mike McCarthy can get this thing turned around and everybody's playing up to the level of talent, then I think Dallas definitely could end up going 11-6. That definitely is the best case scenario for Dallas. And their schedule isn't all that difficult. I mean, the first half is, but I think in the second half, it gets kind of lax. The first half, you have to play the Bucs to open the season, the Chargers on the road. Then you have to face the Philadelphia Eagles, Carolina. Those aren't tough games, but I definitely think Carolina is a little bit of a sleeper team that a lot of people are sleeping on. Then you look at the Giants. You got to face the Patriots on the road. Then, coming off a bye week, things kind of slow down for you. Face Minnesota, Denver, Atlanta. Then you got to face Kansas City, which is probably the toughest game that you have at this point. And then everything pretty much is smooth sailing for the most part. You face New Orleans. That could be difficult. Yeah, you face the Raiders. But your first half schedule isn't going to be as easy as what you have to close out the season. So I think the best case scenario for the Dallas Cowboys is going to be 11-6. If Mike McCarthy can get this team playing good and he can show everybody that he's a good coach, or at least an average coach, then this team definitely should be in the playoffs. But the worst case scenario for Dallas is 8-9. I think with Dak Prescott and how improved they are on defense, this team should at least win 8 games. I think that should be the lower part of the spectrum for Dallas. At best, they're an 11-win team. At worst, I think this is an 8-win team, because this team just has too much talent to just crash and burn. Now, even if Mike McCarthy isn't a great coach, like, I think he should at least win 8 games. Like, you have to be the worst coach in NFL history to not be able to win at least 8 games with how much talent is on this team. Now, of course, you have concerns about the defense. Yeah, you brought in a lot of guys at linebacker. You drafted Michael Parsons. You had Jabril Cox. You bring in Keanu O'Neal. You also bring in Dan Quinn, the former head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, to be your defensive coordinator. So the Dallas Cowboys have went all in on the defense. But what if those changes and the guys you brought in are not enough? Now, the offense is going to be really good. We know that. They should have one of the best offenses in the NFL this year. But we don't know in particular how good that defense is going to be, which is why I think there's a good chance that they could go 8-9. Now, my overall record prediction for Dallas this year is going to be 9-8. I think that Dallas is capable of making the playoffs, but you guys know how I roll in this channel. I don't care how much talent you have on your team if you don't have a capable head coach. I don't know if Mike McCarthy is the right guy in Dallas. I don't know if Mike McCarthy is going to be the guy who can get this team into the playoffs, because for over the last decade, Dallas hasn't missed the playoffs because of a lack of talent, which is what people fail to realize. They have missed the playoffs because of coaching. And if you don't have the coaching set in place, then your talent doesn't matter. Nick Saban told Bill Belichick that it doesn't matter how much talent you have on your roster if the coach can't get those guys in the right position to succeed. And that stands true to this day, because you look at what Jason Garrett did his last season. They underachieved with a incredible roster. You look at what happened with Freddie Kitchens with the Cleveland Browns, who he also had a really talented roster. So you look at Mike McCarthy, I just don't know if he's that guy to get Dallas into the playoffs. Like 9-8 may be good enough to backdoor your way in, to get that last seed, that 7th seed. But overall, I just think that Dallas is a fringe playoff contender until Mike McCarthy can show me otherwise. And I do have the right to have reservations about Mike McCarthy. I don't think this is outlandish and whatnot. I know Dallas Cowboy fans are going to come on here and say, JT, we have so much talent. And I understand that. But talent doesn't win games. Coaching plus talent is what wins games, and that's what I think a lot of people fail to realize in this day and age of the NFL. So I have 9-8, like I mentioned. Best case scenario for Dallas, 11-6. Worst case scenario for the Dallas Cowboys, 8-9. My overall prediction is 9-8. Moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles, the team that finished last in this division. They went 4-11-1. They had a lot of dysfunction in the front office. You fired Doug Peterson, and you bring in an entirely new coaching staff. Now, I know a lot of people aren't high on who the Philadelphia Eagles hired as their new head coach. He didn't have a great press conference, but like I was talking with my guy, Philly 500, make sure that you guys go ahead and check out that training camp preview. But I think that a lot of people try to nitpick these coaches before they even coach a single game. Are we really going to not give this guy a chance and just assume this guy is a bad head coach based off a press conference? People, you guys have to understand something. Not everybody is going to be a Dan Campbell. Not everybody's going to come out on fire in their press conferences. Sometimes you have coaches who are not good in press conferences, that are just good coaches. And that's okay. But let's not just pass judgment on this guy without him even coaching a single game. For all we know, he could be better than Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell can say all the right things, but may not be it for the Detroit Lions when it comes to the on-the-field performance. You have people who can sell you a car, and you have people who can fix your car. I prefer the guy who can fix my car, get my car rolling on the road, versus a guy who can just sell me a car. I don't care if you can sell me a car if the car doesn't work. You can sell me a car for a good price, and yet I drive it out the parking lot and it's breaking down. And people have to understand this. There are two kinds of people out there. You have people who can sell you a dream. You have people who can actually go out there and attain their dream. So don't pay attention to all of the hate that's going towards this head coach for Philadelphia just because he had a bad press conference. The guy was nervous. Some people aren't good with the media. And when you look at Philadelphia this year, I definitely feel like this is a team that could be the worst team in the NFL, but I'm also having a hard time understanding how they could. Because they do have talent, at least on the offensive side of the football. If their offensive line can stay healthy, you could have a really good running game with Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders back there. Of course, you have concerns about wide receiver and whatnot, but you have Devontae Smith, and you guys know how I feel about Devontae Smith. I feel like Devontae Smith is going to end up having a better rookie season this year than what Justin Jefferson had last year in 2020. And I believe in Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts may not be the guy in a lot of you people's eyes, but I feel like Jalen Hurts is definitely going to end up having a really solid season for Philadelphia. I just feel like there is a chance Philadelphia could be the worst team in the NFL, but with the talent that they have, it's not like they are just, derived the talent like the Houston Texans. So my swing games for Philadelphia, I have week 1 on the road in Atlanta. I think that's a really big game because you look at two teams right now that you don't really know how good or how bad they're going to be, which is why I think this is a very big game for both of those two teams, both Atlanta and Philadelphia, because you have two teams that a lot of people aren't really high on and don't have high expectations. And on top of that, you look at Philadelphia, they have to play the 49ers, Cowboys, Chiefs, Panthers, Bucks, Raiders, and the Lions, the Chargers, the Broncos. So their schedule for at least the first part of the regular season is pretty difficult. There's not really any cakewalks coming up. So I think for Philadelphia, I think for them to start the season not 1-0 will be a huge momentum boost for not only this new coaching staff, but for the overall morale. Week 12 against New York Giants is a really big game for me because after that, your schedule eases up. after you played the New York Giants on the road week 12, week 13, you face the Jets. You have a bye week, week 14. You play Washington. You got to face the Giants again. And you got to face the Cowboys. So after week 12, the Philadelphia Eagles start their division schedule. Now, it's really weird that the majority of their divisional games are going to be played in the late stretch of the season, opposed to starting the season out playing against the majority of their teams in their division. And if they can win, a couple of these games, like against the Buccaneers or the Raiders, and pull off a couple of upsets, if they can go into this stretch, with a couple of wins under their belt, and they're able to at least go, win against Washington, a win against the Giants, and another win against Washington, if they're able to win at least one out of one of those games, then you have to be feeling pretty confident about Philadelphia. Maybe they could make a late playoff push. Maybe people could be underestimating Philadelphia. But with Philadelphia, this is a team that doesn't have a lot of upside at all. I think best case is 6 wins. Just being honest. I know this team has a little bit of talent, but overall, I just have a lot of concerns about their defense. Okay, you know what you have in Darius Slay as your number 1 corner. But who's playing your second option? Everybody wants to bring in Steven Nelson and whatnot, but we don't know who's going to be starting at that second cornerback spot for the Philadelphia Eagles. And even if they do have a guy who they trust in, I don't trust in him. You can sell me a wolf ticket all you want to, but there's not really a lot of talent at corner aside from Darius Slay when it comes to this cornerback position. Then you look at linebacker. Linebacker is another big concern. I mean, yeah, you signed the guy from Minnesota, but still, there's still a gaping hole at linebacker. So for Philadelphia, you have a lot of holes on this defense that, quite frankly, I don't really believe in. So I think for Philadelphia, this is a team that doesn't really have a ton of upside. This isn't a team that you can say, well, JT, if everything goes right, they can win this many games. If everything goes right for Philadelphia, I honestly believe that they only win 6 games. In my worst case scenario, they can go 3-14. Like I said, the upside is not that high for Philadelphia, but the downside is really high. Philadelphia could really crash and burn this year. Jalen Hurts, what if he's not the guy? What if Devontae Smith ends up being a bust? There's a lot of things that are coming into play when it comes to the worst case scenario for Philadelphia. I understand you Eagles fans got to be optimistic about your team, and everybody is. But let's just be honest. That defense isn't really good. Your defensive line is pretty good, but the rest of your defense is shaky. And on offense, you have your offensive line who, yeah, everybody's good when they're healthy, or at least a 30-year offensive line, but they can't stay healthy, and they're also up there in age. And these guys also, when they have been able to stay on the field, they haven't had the most success, really. They're not the same players that they once were in their prime. Everybody's getting a little bit up there in age. So 3-14 is my worst case scenario. My overall prediction for Philadelphia is 4-13. I definitely feel like this is a team that is going to be having one of the first 3 picks in next year's 2022 NFL draft. I mean, this team, it's not like they have no talent at all. You got a little bit of something, but you don't have a lot. I don't think this is the worst team in the NFL. I think the Texans are, but I definitely feel like the Eagles are right behind them. This is a team that does have a lot of talent. I mean, you have a lot of older guys on the roster who I feel like may be a little bit past their glory days. And ultimately, I don't see Philadelphia having a lot of success this year. Before I move on to the next 2 teams that we have to talk about, the New York Giants and the Washington football team, make sure that you guys go ahead, follow me on my social media platforms. My Instagram and Twitter is both JTSports_. You can follow me on those by clicking the link down in the description down below. Also, make sure to check out the JT Sports Podcast when this live stream is done. It will be uploaded on all podcasting platforms for those of you guys who want to listen to the audio version. We have a couple of people in the chat. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. My guy, I am Danny 716 says, what up, JT? 3 more weeks till preseason. Yes, sir. Hall of Fame game is just around the corner. Washington's winning the division or the Giants. My guy Sean Ockridge says, JT, be safe in that hurricane, bro. Yes, sir, I'm trying. I say like 10-7, 11-6. I got Philly going 5-12. Philly is going to have the number 2 overall pick. So moving on to the third team, the New York Giants. Now, there are a lot of people who are really high on the New York Football Giants going into this year. And I understand why. This is a team that had a major overhaul on offense this past offseason. Dave Gettleman, you have to give Dave Gettleman his props. And I don't care what gripes you have about what Dave Gettleman has done in the past. If this team isn't good, it's going to be because of Daniel Jones. Okay, you have Joe Judge, who showed a lot of promise in his first year as the head coach for the Giants. He showed a little bit of reminiscent for what happened with Brian Flores his first year in Miami. This was a team that didn't start out great, but in the second half of the year, they really picked up momentum, especially when they put off that big upset against the Seattle Seahawks. And what a lot of people aren't talking about is that this team almost came close to winning the division. If they didn't get screwed over the last week of the season by the Philadelphia Eagles, this team probably could have been in the playoffs. Now, I don't know how competitive this team would have been. I don't know if they would have been as competitive as what Washington was against Tampa Bay, because there's no way you could have told me you expected Washington to have the chance they had at beating Tampa Bay in that playoff game with Taylor Heinicke at quarterback. So for Washington, I understand why a lot of people are high on this team. My biggest swing games for Washington are Week 7 against Carolina, Week 11 on the road against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And remind you that swing games are not make or break games, must win games, whatnot. Swing games are games that you're going to look back at the end of the season and you're going to say, okay, if we won this game, maybe our season could have went this way. Or our season went this way because we lost to this team. We lost this game. So I think that Carolina game is really interesting because you have two teams who are pretty much in similar situations. You have two head coaches who had a pretty good amount of success their first year, per se, in terms of what the overall expectation was for the New York Giants. I only had them winning 3 games, and a lot of people weren't high on the Carolina Panthers last season. So you have two head coaches who showed a lot of promise in their first year. Now you have the expectations ramping up where you have a good amount of people who believe that the Panthers are a playoff caliber football team. Panthers fans are expecting to make it to the playoffs, and Giants fans out there, a good amount of you guys are expecting the Giants to make it to the playoffs this season. So that Week 7 game is a really great game to watch in terms of trying to determine who's going to be that next team to take that step up from the bottom of the barrel of their division to making it all the way into the playoffs. You have two teams who are in similar situations. Week 11 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I believe that this is a really big game for the Giants because Giants fans, remember, you almost beat the Buccaneers last year. You had the Buccaneers on the rope. You went into a 5-round championship fight, and you were able to get through the first 4 rounds. But then once round 5 came, you just couldn't quite do what you had to do to pull off the upset. You guys remember when Kel Sonnen, Uncle Kel, fought Anderson Silva the first time they met up? I mean, my guy was really close to pulling off one of the biggest upsets, not just in combat sports history, but in sports history in general. Nobody gave Uncle Kel a chance of beating Anderson Silva. And he went in there and gave Anderson Silva all he had. But then when it came down to it, that last round, he wasn't able to close out. And that's what happened with the New York Giants last year. So I think that Buccaneers game definitely is a very big swing game because if the Giants win that game, I think the morale and the momentum for that team is going to be through the roof at a very important time of the season. Best case scenario for the New York Giants, 12-5. I've been telling people all this offseason that how good this team is going to be is going to be determined by how well Daniel Jones plays this year. If Daniel Jones is the Daniel Jones that we saw last year, they're not going to be any good. But if Daniel Jones balls out, on top of that Patrick Graham-led defense, this team could end up being one of the biggest surprises this year. And not only that, they could be a team that could end up having one of the better records in the NFC. 12-5. So for the New York Giants, man, like, the sky is the limit. Like, I think that the Giants and the Broncos are the two teams that have the most upside this year. There are two teams that, if everything goes right, they're going to be really, really good. And if Daniel Jones can at least lower his turnover numbers in half, I think that he could be in for, a really great season. You bring in Kadarius Toney from the draft, round 1. You bring in Kenny Galladay. You got weapons. You got Saquon coming back. The Giants didn't really address the offensive line as much as what I would hope. But apparently this coaching staff has a lot of high praise and the young guys that they have in this offensive line. And Joe Judge trusts his coaching staff to be able to have these guys ready to come week 1 to the point that they're going to be better than what they were last year. So I'm going to trust Joe Judge, and I'm going to trust the overall organization for the New York Giants judgment when it comes to their offensive line. It's Young had a lot of growing pains last season, but apparently this organization really trusts the coaching staff, and they trust the young players that they have in this offensive line to be able to develop the way they expect. Now, worst case, 4-13. The Giants have a lot of upside, but if Daniel Jones is the Daniel Jones that we saw reminiscent of last season, this team isn't going to be any good. Honestly. I think worst case is 4-13. This team is either going to be really good or they're going to be downright awful. They're going to be similar to what the Philadelphia Eagles were last year. There were some people who said the Eagles can be really good, and there were a lot of people who said the Eagles can be really bad. If things go wrong, things are going to go awfully wrong. And for the Giants, if they go 4-13, I think it's because of Daniel Jones and Jason Garrett. Jason Garrett not putting Daniel Jones in the proper situations to succeed, and Daniel Jones turning the football over too much. So 4-13 is my expectation of what can go possibly wrong if Daniel Jones doesn't improve like how Giants fans expect him to improve. Now, my overall record prediction for the New York Giants this season is 7-10. I think that the Giants are a team that's definitely trending in the right direction, but overall, I just feel like it's really hard for me to trust Daniel Jones. It really is. This is a guy who is a turnover machine, similar to my guy Jameis Winston. But at the same time, it's not just Daniel Jones, it's that offensive line. That offensive line is really young. And these Giants coaches and this Giants organization is banking on these guys producing this year and improving over the course of the offseason, training camp, and preseason. I don't really know. I really think that New York should have put a little bit more emphasis on trying to improve the offensive line. So this offensive line is really hit and miss. Daniel Jones can be really hit and miss. And even if Daniel Jones thinks it up, I think that their defense should be able to bail them out in a couple of games. But overall, I don't think that this defense is going to be able to carry the load if Daniel Jones continues to turn the football over like he has in the past. And everybody's saying all they need Daniel Jones to be is a game manager. But how are you going to say somebody needs to be a game manager when that's not really what they are? Like, you can't just say they need somebody to be something that they're not. I don't think Daniel Jones is a game manager. This is a guy who likes to push the envelope. He's aggressive. He likes to take chances. He is the white version of Jameis Winston, pretty much. So for the Giants, man, like, yeah, if Daniel Jones and this offensive line mesh, they go 12-5. If not, they can end up going 4-13 or 7-10. I think they end up going 7-10 this year. Last thing we have to talk about, the Washington football team. You have to give a lot of praise to what Ron Rivera did last year. I revealed my rankings for all of the head coaches who were hired last offseason. And I had Ron Rivera number 1 over Kevin Stefanski. And I got a lot of pushback for that. But I was telling people, I said, listen, Kevin Stefanski took over a Browns team that was already made. You already had one of the best rosters in the NFL. All you really needed was a coach who really knew how to utilize those players and manage the personalities in those locker rooms. Ron Rivera had a tougher job than what Kevin Stefanski inherited in Cleveland. You had a team that's facing a lot of allegations. You got Dan Snyder as your owner, one of the worst owners in sports. You have a roster that didn't really have that much talent. The defensive line was really good. Corner was solid. But aside from that, Ron Rivera did a very spectacular job. Like, Ron Rivera just didn't turn around a team that had bad talent. Ron Rivera turned around a franchise that was a dumpster fire. Washington was one of the most dysfunctional organizations in sports. And Ron Rivera in year one came around and just rejuvenated this franchise. This franchise was down bad. Like, Ron Rivera turned around the culture. And remind you, I understand that Cleveland had a really bad culture, but Cleveland wasn't going through all of the turmoil that Washington had in their front office. Literally, like, Ron Rivera had to come in and put his foot down. And he did a really great job. On top of that, he won games and made it to the playoffs. I don't care how weak the division was. What Ron Rivera did, especially with the fact that he had cancer on top of that, is very encouraging. And a lot of people are not giving Ron Rivera the respect that he did, the respect that he deserves for the job that he did last year, battling cancer, taking over a team that had all this turmoil in the front office. Give Ron Rivera his props. He was the best head coaching hire last year over Kevin Stefanski. And they went 7-9, they won the division. And I told everybody was sleeping on Washington. I had them going 7-9. Now, I didn't think they were going to end up winning the division, making it to the playoffs, but you don't really see a division as bad as what the NFC East was last year. And Ron Rivera and Washington took advantage of that. This year, the two biggest swing games for the Washington football team. Week 8 on the road against the Denver Broncos. The reason why I say that Broncos game is a big swing game is because you're looking at two teams that they have a lot of talent, but you have very volatile quarterbacks. For Denver, we don't even know who's going to be starting. We don't know if it's going to be Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater. Drew Lock is a super aggressive quarterback that has all this upside, but he's not really all that great. And you got Teddy Bridgewater, who Teddy Bridgewater isn't going to lose you any games. But like we saw last year in Carolina, he's not going to win you a lot of games neither when it comes down to those one-possession matchups. So you look at Washington, you have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who has times that he plays incredible, like he's looking like an MVP candidate. And then you have times that he looks really awful. A good example, last year, week 1 against the New England Patriots when he was playing for the Dolphins, he was awful. And the Dolphins lost that game because of that. But you had some games in the stretch when he played really good, like against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I think that Washington and Denver are two teams that have questions at quarterback. Well, for Washington, it's expected for Ryan Fitzpatrick to be the guy, but we don't know how consistent Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be. But you can make the argument and say that this is the most talented team that Ryan Fitzpatrick has ever been a starter for. Now, week 10 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road, I think that is going to be Washington's Super Bowl. Okay? You have a Buccaneers team that is going to be coming off a bye, and so is Washington. So you look at Washington, and you look at how close they came to pulling off the upset in that playoff matchup. I mean, if you're a Washington fan, this is pretty much your Super Bowl when it comes to regular season. If Washington is able to pull off the upset against the Buccaneers, oh my God. The momentum that they're going to have to close the rest of the season is going to be off the charts. And I think that their schedule is pretty solid. I mean, it's not hard, but you got to face Seattle on a Monday night. You got to play the Raiders, the Cowboys, Eagles, Cowboys again, Eagles again, Giants. So pretty much after you play Tampa Bay, you're going to finish the last stretch of the season going against your division opponents. My best case scenario for Washington is 12-5. Like the New York Giants, if everything goes according to plan and Ryan Fitzpatrick is able to at least be decent and not awful, Washington should be able to win 12 games. And a lot of people have to understand that Washington doesn't need to be stacked on offense to win the Super Bowl. They don't have to be stacked on offense to be a playoff caliber football team. Ron Rivera took that Washington job last year because this team was pretty much already good in the trenches. This defense was already pretty solid. Ron Rivera is a defensive-minded coach, and he's a guy who likes to have a team that is really good up front when it comes to their defensive line. Washington already had that. Ron Rivera wants to win games by his defense. If you ask Ron Rivera, if you're going into a 2-minute drive, who would you rather have on the field to win the game for you during those 2 minutes? Your offense or your defense? Ron Rivera is going to tell you 99.9% the defense. And when you look at Washington, you bring in Jamin Davis, you improve the linebacker position, which was a really big area of weakness. That defense probably is going to end up being the best or one of the best defenses in football this year. You have Chase Young, who a lot of people are predicting to win Defensive Player of the Year this year. Everybody's expecting a 15-sack season from Chase Young. On top of that, you look at Montez Sweat. You got Matt Ioannidis coming back. Washington has the best defensive line in the NFL, and that's coming from a Steelers fan. So if Ryan Fitzpatrick plays solid, you look at bringing in Curtis Samuel, you got Terry McLaurin, you got Antonio Gibson, who could be in for a breakout season. The offensive line, some concerns, but I don't think it's bad. I think it's decent. I think it's solid. So you look at Washington, I think best case scenario, like the New York Giants, they go 12-5. This is a team that has a lot of upside. Now, worst case scenario, I say, like New York, 4-13. This team really could crap the bed. This is a team that has a good amount of talent, but at the same time, Ryan Fitzpatrick could cost him a lot of games. Okay, and everybody sold on Taylor Heinicke, but you got to ask yourself, how soon is Ron Rivera going to pull the plug on Taylor Heinicke? When are we going to see Taylor Heinicke get in? So for Washington, I say they go 4-13, worst case scenario. Now my overall record prediction is going to be 10-7. I think Washington is going to go 10-7 this year. I think they're going to be able to pull off an upset against Tampa Bay. I think they're going to be able to upset Seattle Monday night. Washington, to me, is a team that should be able to make it into the playoffs. They should be able to clinch that wild card spot. And I am going to pick them to win this division. I love what Ron Rivera has done so far in the brief amount of time that he's been the head coach of the Washington football team. He has changed around the team that was going through a lot of turmoil, a lot of things in the front office. And I think that things are finally trending in the right direction for the Washington organization and its franchise. So I got Washington going 10-7 this year. And this is it for my 2021 NFC East record prediction. So you guys let me know down in the comment section down below, who do you guys think is going to end up winning this division? What are your record predictions that you have for the Cowboys, Eagles, Giants, and the Washington football team? I would like to know. So sound off. Also, make sure that if you haven't already, that you guys like the live stream, that you guys subscribe to the channel, you turn on post notifications, and also make sure that you guys check out the JT Sports Podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. And if you guys want to listen to the audio replay of this live stream, it will be up on all of those podcasts and platforms. And also make sure that if you listen on Apple Podcasts, that you leave a 5-star review on the pod. It helps out a lot. And I appreciate you guys for watching. I know that it took a little bit of time to get this live stream going, but everything's been pretty smooth. Haven't had any buffering or whatnot. So I will be back tomorrow with my NFC West record prediction, which is a really interesting division because the NFC West as of right now has 4 teams that are all capable of making it to the playoffs. And all 4 teams are going to be really good. And one of those teams are going to have to miss the playoffs. So it's going to take a lot of time for me to make my record predictions for that division. But I hope that you guys tune in tomorrow at 3:50. Hopefully we don't have no technical issues.